Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. As we continue this week talking about what happened to the apostles after Jesus went back to heaven, I'll remind you again that there's little that is actually in the Bible about what happened to these 12, and extremely little from other other sources, except for legends, stories, and rumors. The apostles we will look at today are some of the more well-known in the Bible, and Peter, of course, is mentioned often in the Bible itself and in legend. The first one we will look at today is Matthew, and you will remember him as a tax collector before Jesus called him. Matthew stands as a good example that Jesus calls people whom we might not expect to be his followers. In Bible times, tax collectors were the scourge of society. Since they collected taxes for the Romans, they were seen as collaborators with the enemy. The Romans would establish an amount owed by a region, and it was the tax collector's job to weasel it out of you. Anything the tax collector was able to get beyond what the Romans demanded became his salary. So when the people saw wealthy tax collectors, they knew the tax collector was overcharging them and living high off their hard work. It's easy to understand why they were scorned. But when Jesus called Matthew, he was a tax collector, and his symbol is a shield showing bags of money. It always intrigues me that the disciples chose Judas to keep their treasury and not Matthew, who was clearly skilled in dealing with money. Perhaps this reflects that they didn't fully trust Matthew either. There's a debate about his connection to the gospel in his name. We really don't know if he was the author or not. Legend says that he preached to the Jews and that he was martyred in Ethiopia. When it comes to Peter, we know much, much more. He was Andrew's brother, and there are many stories about him preaching, healing, and spreading the gospel in the book of Acts after Jesus returned to heaven. Most scholars think that Peter actually wrote 1 Peter, and there's some evidence that Peter was a key source behind Mark's gospel. No one really knows what happened to Peter after the Bible stops talking about him. There are reports of him working all over Asia Minor. There's a strong tradition that he ended up in Rome, and if so, it was after Paul was killed, since Paul never mentions him there. It is probable that he went there late in his career, was there a few months, and then was martyred. Legend says that when he was to be crucified, he requested to be crucified head downward, saying, "I die for my Lord, not worthy to die like him." There's a legendary story called Quo Vadis, in which Peter escapes and meets Jesus on the road, rushing into Rome to die in Peter's place. Peter returns instead. Peter is considered the first pope and is supposedly buried under St. Peter's Basilica. That's why the site was chosen about AD 180. When Jesus asked who the disciples say that he is, Peter answered, "You are the Christ." Jesus then gave him the keys of the kingdom. What you bind on earth is bound in heaven, and what you loose on earth is loosed in heaven. That's why his symbol is keys. There's a story in Acts about a Phillip and an Ethiopian eunuch. That's not Philip the disciple. That person with the eunuch was one of the deacons chosen to serve so the apostles could preach. Legends are that Philip the apostle traveled with Bartholomew and went to Asia Minor. Another legend is that he connected with his sister and distributed food to the needy. The strongest story about Philip is that he went to Hierapolis, a very wicked city, and was martyred there, being hung on a pillar. Legend says that as he died, the earth shook and threatened to swallow those there, but when they repented, it stopped. Philip's symbol includes loaves of bread because Philip was the one who brought the boy to Jesus at the feeding of the 5,000. It's interesting that early on like this, Philip was bringing people to Jesus. That's what apostles do. That's our job too. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.